All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Invent Tribe Q&A. There's Amy Jo.
Hello. Welcome, everyone. Hi, David.
Hello, hello. Yes, that's important. Welcome, everyone. These Q&As are made possible by people asking good questions, and so we really appreciate everybody that shows up to these Q&As because it really makes the whole thing work for us and gets the conversation going. So yeah, that's always the fun part. And in all these Q&As, for those that have been with us or been to these before, you've heard my little spiel or introduction. And so I always tell everybody, I've been in the business for, I think, 12 years now. I have 5 of my own products licensed, and I've coached 178 people to license their own products. And so I always think that that's part of the journey is learning and growing and it's always a learning experience, right? I'm still learning stuff and having a ton of fun. And this is also, I'm here with Amy Jo, who I've worked with for a very long time.
Yes.
What is it now? Like 8 years?
Yeah.
10 years?
I'd say it's been a while.
Yep.
Because I've been in the industry for a little over 10 years, just starting on my own. But then you and I started working together about 8 years ago.
Yep.
Or so. So yeah, we're a good team.
Yep. So in saying that, we know how to help people get their products licensed. We've been through the ringer. We understand that process, and we've coached many people through it. And so do bring us your questions, even if you think they're too difficult, or if they're too complex, or even if you feel like they're dumb questions. As the journey goes, when I was getting started, I didn't ask questions because I thought they were, not good questions. But in reality, I get a lot of questions that are simple, but also complex, right? They're simple question, but complex answer and getting to the end result. So do put your questions in. If I have any news, I like to start out with good news. I had a project we were working on for like 3 months, and yesterday got a call back, and the company was super interested. They want to license the product. So they're like, let's get on a conference call right away. And so we did a conference call earlier today. It was a little bit of negotiation, a little bit of talking numbers, but essentially they're like, we're green lighting the whole project, and moving forward, we just need to get, they have a market analysis, which their company does. And so that'll be fun to kind of see how that all comes together over the next. And they said they were like, we'll get this thing ready to go within 3 weeks, and not on shelf, but them determined if they are moving forward with it or not. And then we moved to licensing agreement. So
that's fast. That's exciting. I didn't even know about that, David. Congrats.
Yeah, well, it literally happened. I got an email I wouldn't say last night, like 6 p.m. And then they're like, let's schedule it for tomorrow. And so it was literally so fast. Usually these things take weeks to get to that point. So it kind of came out of nowhere. Honestly, it was a project that was, you have projects that you work on for a while and you start to get interest, but then it starts to fall apart, and you're like, all right, this kind of looked like it's not going to go. And it really got life breathed back into it in the last 24 hours. So
that's awesome. Good deal. And and that's the breath. Talk about life that's breathing back into it. It's a breath of fresh air, because for a lot of people, when they feel like their product is okay, I just have to put it on the shelf, and then something comes through like that. And it happens all the time.
Well, I think you were telling me that happened with one of your projects. It was some time ago. Was it? I think it was a conversation we had, because you had pitched it to 80 companies or something. And then you're like, screw this thing.
Yeah. And I haven't closed a deal on it yet, but yeah, it was definitely where it was just and then they just circle back around out of the blue, and you just don't even you're like, oh, wait, I just dropped that project, and now I wasn't even following up with you, and here you are.
Yeah. And that's the way it was. And I don't know, this is a weird thing, but it almost has like a personal relationship with your product, because sometimes you're like, I love this project, it's so great, and it's like, and then sometimes you're like, I hate this thing, I'm never working on it again. Like, it's just like screw you, project, never talk to you again.
And it can be for a lot of reasons. Like it can be mainly because like how I love how you say like, okay, like the industry is just unfriendly, and they're like ghosting us, like we're like the bad like ex-girlfriend, or like, oh, you have an ugly child type of thing. Like it's like,
get out of here.
like, so it happens, all of it.
Yep. So that's always the good news to get a webinar started. And I've got some questions already in the Q&A box. So
cool.
Salvatore, thank you, by the way, for those that have already chimed in with some questions. Salvatore says or asks, after a term sheet is established, a lawyer is needed to check. Can you recommend a lawyer? Yes, I can recommend a lawyer. It depends though. What are you having a lawyer check a term sheet for? A lot of the times, and I guess I'm going to expand on this. So like one thing I've personally done wrong, and then I've seen other people do wrong, is they try to negotiate a term sheet. And like, I try to skip the term sheet because a lot of the times the term sheet wastes everybody's time. And the reason that is because when you're negotiating a term sheet, let's say like Amy Jo and I, let's say you're the licensee and I'm licensor, and you come to me with a term sheet that says, a 3% royalty, right? And I come back to you and I'm like, oh, let's raise that up, right? And I start negotiating hard on trying to increase my royalty rate from that whatever initial offer you give all the way up, right? And so let's say I push it all the way to 5%. And like, Amy Jo, you need to go back to your boss and okay it and approve it and like go back and forth, right? And so like every negotiation, you have kind of these breaking points where if you push it too far, they just put their hands up and walk away. Say, I don't need this project. Let's move on to something else. Mm-hmm. And so, right, I'm pushing the envelope on my royalty rate. And then that's just the term sheet. And this is what I did, right? I negotiated the term sheet. And then when it went past the term sheet and turned into a contract, there's an old saying that says, you set the price, I'll set the terms. And this is 100% true in licensing, that like an inventor, they can say, oh, I'll get 25%. Well, if I'm setting the terms, then I can make that 25% like less than 1% in reality by the terms. And so, and this might be getting a little bit complex for just a Q&A without having like samples and stuff like that. But when you have a term sheet and you negotiate your royalty rate higher, well, then they can just take the definition of how your royalty rate is defined in the actual contract and reduce it down by saying like, all right, your 5% that you wanted was based off net sales. And that net sales number is gross sales minus packaging, shipping, cost of goods, executive salaries. And like, it's like chop, 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 chop. And what they're doing is they're reducing the dollar amount that your 5% is based off of. And so that will bring your actual percentage down to, 1 or 2%. And so that's why I tell people, do not negotiate term sheets. Try to sidestep a term sheet and move right to contract, because you'll waste your time and your leverage, right? We only have so much leverage that we can have in a deal to move our numbers up and down. And so like, I would take a 3% of gross sales over a 5% of a net sales definition that reduces all these things out, because in the end of the day, what matters is the amount of money that I'm actually making. So Salvatore, I guess I would ask you the question you're asking, to have a lawyer check over a term sheet. But in reality, like, it's like we need to be moving to contract faster than we do trying to negotiate out and approve a term sheet, unless that term sheet is more structured like a contract. You see, there's a lot of different moving parts in this. This is not just as I said earlier, there's some simple questions that have very complex answers. I do have an attorney I can recommend. If you want to email me, David at InventTribe, I can email you his contact information. It's a guy I've used for a long time, ever since I started in this business, and he's great. But I would check on how that deal is going first, I guess. And if you wanted to email me kind of a little more detail on where you're at, I might be able to fill in some individual or specific information related to that.
Yeah, because I've not really seen anybody, like anyone who I have worked with, hire an attorney for a term sheet per se. But that's because, I mean, we guide people kind of through that process when they do that. But when you at least get like a company who has a basic contract that they start with, like a lot of companies are like, okay, well, this is their basic contract. We give 5% or 3% or whatever it is, right? Based off of these numbers, but it also has the additional terms in there, so you can kind of see the big picture to know, like, okay, what, like you see the big picture to know where the pain points are. That's not just focused on just the percentage, you know, and so that helps you get further more quickly.
Yes. And so know that term sheets aren't as simple and straightforward as just like a term sheet, right? So, so yeah. And they had messaged in on the messages after getting the contract who they said, I'll email you. All right, cool. We'll take care of the rest of that question on a one-on-one. So next question, Pilar. Hello. Do you all have contacts in the automotive industry? So Amy Jo, do you want to dive into automotive industry? Like on car versus aftermarket?
Yeah. So, I mean, when it comes to who we have contacts with, I mean, we specialize in teaching you everybody, like there are so many different industries and then micro categories. And so that's what David's referring to with wanting me to kind of touch on, because when you talk about automotive, if you're trying to recreate the, let's say the rear view mirror for Ford, you know, motor to put into all of their trucks, that's a whole different category than if you were to have like a little stick on to the, like, you know, it's like an aftermarket product that's easy, that's an add-on accessory after you already purchased the truck. So the experiences between the two of them are completely different. When it comes to like the actual automotive manufacturer, those types of that avenue is going to be a lot more difficult than if you go for the aftermarket, you know, accessory process, because first of all, the manufacturers have to go through all of the testing. They have to go through approval if they like it, testing, you know, and then like it's just a much more difficult process. And then also you have a very few amount of people that you can reach out to for the idea. Where with the aftermarket products that you can do, people can customize. It's more appealing because they can customize their own vehicles. There are a lot more companies for you to be able to reach out to. And it's just more of a friendly market in general.
Very much so. And to add on to that, the like Ford Motor or like a automobile company, they do top-down design. And so when they want a new rear view mirror, a lot of the times they're innovating or developing it internally and then passing it down to a supplier to manufacture. And so they're not looking to get into the business of paying royalties on anything. And I mean, it's very much so.
Theirs.
Yes, they want it to be theirs. They want to own the intellectual property of it. And so it's very tough to get in line in terms of like on a manufacturer's line. You're way better off getting an aftermarket product, having the IP. If it becomes a strong aftermarket product, it might get pulled into an inline type thing if you have IP. And I was thinking when Amy Jo was talking, like it's not only difficult, but it's super expensive because your IP, your intellectual property investment has got to be big. Like you need a portfolio if you're getting on a vehicle in production. And so I guess to cap off or encapsulate this conversation, developing a list of companies for aftermarket product it's not difficult. We have contacts there, and you can develop it, right? It's going to like an AutoZone or Pep Boys, it's walking down the shelf. It's finding where your product would be selling and then looking at those products and finding, and then just calling out to those companies. So Um,
And the other thing is, depending on what your product may be, if you were thinking about, hey, I'm going to try to license to BMW, for like if you were aiming initially for one of the big like like automotive manufacturers, think about how this could possibly be an aftermarket type of product. Include that. This is not legal advice, but include that in your intellectual property or your anything that you're filing for that, and try to have like both versions. But I think David would back me on this. But like, so cover it in your IP. But when it comes to reaching out to companies from a licensing perspective, we'd recommend going aftermarket first, and and then see if you can get lucky and on the side and work with big dogs. But it's not very easy to do.
nope. So I hope that helps answer your question. Next question we have. Oh, these questions are filing in, so we're gonna have to get moving.
Okay.
Christopher, can two or more existing products be combined to form a new product? Yes. And if so, how does that new product need to be described to ensure the highest level of protection? So, I mean, I guess obviously with any legal things, when you're looking at protection, speaking to an attorney is the best way to go. From a business perspective, we look at how marketable it is. And part of the marketability is intellectual property, right? And so like a Swiss Army knife, this is the example I like to use a lot of the time, is that if you have a fork, a spoon, and a knife in one Swiss Army knife, that is a combination of things that accomplishes a goal. They look at that as a benefit altogether. If you have a fork, a spoon, a toothpick, and a pair of scissors, that is a different thing that is getting accomplished, and that can be protected in and of itself. And so when you're combining different things to accomplish a goal and it has utility, then that is a new thing, right? And a lot of things in the patent office are combinations of other things to accomplish new goals. Now, if you're combining two things and the two things are basically just like, I'm taking a toothbrush on one end and a flosser on the other, and I'm sticking them together, the IP is going to be a little bit tough because those two things exist and you're not necessarily accomplishing anything new. I'm pretty sure that's probably patented. And so, but I mean, in essence, that could be patented if it wasn't before, because you're taking two devices that accomplish something and you're putting it into one. But a lot of times if you're combining two things, you'd like to accomplish something new.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you were trying to, like for your toothbrush flosser thing, if it were a new travel product, like depending on how you word it, like the category that it falls into as well, definitely helps. I just want to say hi, Christopher, because he's my former student, and
oh, cool.
I worked with him for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. So, and you added on our second part of that question. And if so, how does the new product need to be described to ensure the highest level of protection? The thing I look at for protection is, this, I guess, is a little bit of a different topic, but it's at the same time the same thing. People come to me and they say, what percentage different does a product need to be different? And I look at it as very black and white. I'm like, is it different? And if you're able to explain to me what is different, that is the difference. And so, Christopher, I guess that's the way I would look at it is like, is it different? Yes, it is. Well, if you're able to explain it, that's what the highest level of protection would be, is explaining that difference or how much more value is added, what kind of utility, what kind of physical structures are created to create that benefit to the end customer. And so that's how I would differentiate my intellectual property.
I like that.
Cool. All right. And Christopher, follow up with any other questions you have. Timothy is up next. First, thanks for doing this. Of course, anytime. Do you think a big product can be licensed even if a patent may not be issued due to prior art? Timothy, depends on what category. When you say big product, a lot of times that's perceived as like industry changing. And Amy Jo, I don't know if you wanted to jump in on this. Like, I have a deep rabbit hole I can go down. So,
sorry, I was just like losing angle on the camera.
The big product. If no patent can be published because of prior art, can it still be licensed? Because like when I think of big product, I think of like industry changing. And when I think industry changing, it's like, all right, so then a company has to like gamble the farm on making it work. And why would they gamble the farm on making it work if there's no possible intellectual property to go after? Like that's the hard part.
I feel like the hard part of this question is the big product part. You know, like, so if you were to remove that and you say, do you think a product can be licensed even if it may not have like any like patentability to it? Yes. Yes.
Yeah, they can. I see it all the time.
Yeah, we see it all the time. But a big product, I mean, that kind of adds like an extra layer to us answering that question, because usually like with big products who, you know, that can make big money, they usually, you know, need some level of like protection or ownership of some type.
Yeah. And,
right.
And the reason and so like, Timothy, flip this on its head and look at it from a licensee's perspective, not licensor, right? Or inventor, licensor, licensee is the company. And so when we look at it from their perspective, if there's a low level of investment and it can be a high return in terms of like big product, then they might license it. But I guess I'm saying it's from an investment perspective. They're looking at it and saying, you know, we've got to put essentially like half the company's money or more into this big product. And as soon as it launches, everybody else is like, yeah, that's a great product. We're just going to knock it off and there's no way we can stop them. Why would they invest all that money? And so this is actually an investment question from a licensee's perspective, is how much money do they need to put in to make it work? Because every company wants to be in on a big product that they don't have to invest very much in. So
yeah, it's just about the risk and ROI, like, you know, like, so for them, like speed to market type of thing too. So if it's a big idea or a big project and you have a DRTV company, as seen on TV company, who says, hey, we're going to beat everybody to the punch, you know, get out there because they're high profit margins. It's easy to manufacture. We can market it quickly. People love it. Then that could be that big product that you're talking about that makes money without having to worry about the IP and not, I mean, but you always want to make sure that you're not like knocking people off. So even though you have prior art, you always want to, again, what David was talking about earlier, make sure you know your point of difference too, because you can get in trouble if you don't. So that's huge. Yep.
And this is, when you were talking, this just reminded me of this. So I was working with an attorney years ago, patent attorney that's been very involved in the IP industry for decades. And his comment, and remember, like coming from a patent attorney's perspective, right? They look at patent first. But this patent attorney's been in the business so long that they know that it's not necessarily always about patents. And he said, if you can figure out how to license it, I can figure out how to protect it. And a lot of times, because intellectual property can be, even with prior art, be very thin, right? And like when you have big, broad protection, when you're covering all this different stuff, usually means that there's not many products around it, meaning that there's not usually a lot of money flowing into that industry or that specific product category. And so, and that's something that like I deal with a lot of the times, is like I'm working on a project and I'll get a company interested and they'll be like, what's the IP on this? Be like, oh, I got to figure this out. And so then that's when I get a company interested, is when I start to dig really deep and I actually start to see like, hey, this is actually really patentable if, you know, I can look at it in these different perspectives. And so like, obviously you got to have like an idea on your IP, but don't let that hang you up from the most important thing, is getting in front of potential licensing and see if there's interest. Like once you can generate interest, then figure out the IP later. Obviously you don't want to like completely figure it out later, but like have a decent idea. But like if you can get somebody interested that wants to sell it and make money on it, intellectual property can a lot of the times be figured out after the fact or after you start rolling.
Well, and a lot of times, even if you think you have it figured out, it continues to evolve anyway. When you start going through the manufacturing process, and you start collaborating with your licensee, it will improve, and you want to add things to your IP.
Yes. Yep. 100%. And that's kind of the way every product goes, right? It's not even just big products. It's like,
so don't be scared about that at all. But like David said, like you want to have the best understanding possible, but also understand that it can continue to evolve.
Yep, for sure. Cool. So Timothy, I hope that helps. And like, let us know if you have any questions or like continued thoughts on that and want to talk more. So definitely reach out or put in more questions. Next question is by Carl. Carl, I have to start out and say, I owe you a phone call. I'm sorry. I got your email on Friday and I will give you a call tomorrow. So, but to your question, what do you think of licensing fun, multifunctional children's furniture? Who would be interested in an item like this? Fun, multifunctional children's furniture. Amy Jo?
Okay, hold on a second.
You were reading? I do that.
I was trying to read through what was going on.
No. I do that too. So Carl said, well, and I can jump in on this because I have some experience in multifunctional furniture.
I don't actually have a whole lot of experience in, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So furniture, I think, is such a cool industry to license in. Because like I've coached a handful of people, maybe dozen people through furniture deals, maybe not a dozen, maybe 10. And I think the deals are always so cool because you're getting 5% of like $800. So it's very different. Like you're not 25 cents per unit. You're like $30 and $40 is your royalty per unit sold. And some companies still sell, 1,000 units a month. And so the numbers get big so fast because the price point is just different and they still sell in volume. So I think it's really cool. So if anybody's like towing the line on getting into it, I might just say, jump in, get out there because price points are bigger. Multifunctional children's furniture can be a very cool space. But I think one of the issues would be finding your potential licensees. Distribution chains are different. Like there's no store you go to find children's furniture specifically, right? Like I don't know where to go to, like I have kids and I have children's furniture all over my house. Like I can walk around with a camera and show you it all, but like we order it online. And so you're looking at more direct consumer potential licensees. And sometimes direct consumer potential licensees are a little more difficult to work with. They're just not as streamlined as like when you go to a barbecue spatula company that is a company that sells product to Walmart, they are way easier to get into. They look at innovation. They've got to turn over a lot of products. Where direct consumer, I will tell you over the next 5 years, they're going to become a bigger part of our world as inventors. I'm seeing it more and more. We're getting paid more and more as inventors as a group from direct to consumer companies. And like, sorry, Carl, this is going to be a little bit of a rabbit hole again, man. We're not going to get to all the questions tonight, Amy Jo.
Okay.
So like when you go direct consumer, regular licensees, they go like, all right, I am selling a product to a wholesaler or I'm selling it to a distributor that goes to retail, and retail, there's a 50% markup from there. And so like their profit margin is actually kind of squeezed down quite a bit. But when they go direct to consumer, a lot of times they're working directly with the manufacturer and then they're shipping to a distribution facility and then out. And so their profit margins are way bigger. And so our royalty, our typical 5% royalty is based off of a wholesale price. So let's say your product, and we'll use the exact same product, but let's do it in the math sake of a direct consumer versus a traditional product. So, and just for math sake, I'm going to use 5% and a $20 product. So in a $20 product, we're doing 5% of wholesale. And so 5% of wholesale of $10 is 50 cents per unit. But when you go with a traditional deal, they're doing that $10 that you're getting that wholesale of a net selling price. And so they take a reduction. And so that $10 usually gets down to like $8 or $7. So you're looking at 5% of $7, so 35 cents per unit. When you do that same exact product as a direct consumer product, then you're getting usually like 10 to 17%. So even 10% of the retail price of the $20, you're looking at $2 per unit. So the difference of 35 cents per unit versus $2 per unit is a world of a difference. And even though they're not going to sell like bulk pallets to Walmart, you know, some of these companies, I talked to one company that was selling 10,000 units a day of products that are priced at $70. I mean, that's just astronomical when you look at it from a royalty percentage.
Yeah.
Right. I'm looking at 10%. I'm looking at $7 of 10,000 units per day. That's $70,000 a day as a royalty. Like that's just crazy.
Yeah.
And so like, that's why I see that market exploding in such a big way. But like to circle back to Carl, multifunctional furniture. I think it's great. I think it's an awesome category because prices are bigger, royalties are bigger, but the difficulty or the stumbling block is going to be finding who you're licensing to.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So the long-winded question or long-winded answer.
Well, and there's also, sorry, not to like elongate it even further, but like if you're able to generate interest with your concept from any of these big box store buyers, you know, that could possibly help, like, you know, pull that deal through for Walmart or, you know, Bed Bath and Beyond, where they have the blankets in the kiddie section, you know, that type of thing. Then that could maybe help you with closing that deal with a licensee.
Yep. 100%. And, I mean, there are companies out there, like for those that have little kids, they have a thing called the Nugget. It's basically couch cushions that are made for building forts and stuff. And they're like $250 or $300. I don't know. They're crazy expensive and they're on back order always. And so like, there's these companies that make fun, multifunctional kids furniture that crush it. And so it's just finding them. But getting a pull through on like getting a target interested, which you can do, is totally possible and will close the deal. Like I'm not even questioning that. Like if you get a big retailer on board, that will pull that deal through.
For sure.
Next question. Michael, I'm sure you get asked this frequently, but I haven't been able to keep up with things. Have you both started your own venture with Invent Tribe? Yes. We are crushing it, helping students get their licensing deals. We both used to work for InventRight, and now we are here making it happen. So, yeah. Next question, Lenny, Lenny, hello, by the way. Is there an international PPA? If not, how to protect IP rights internationally without patenting in many countries? Yes, there is a international PPA, but it's not what a PPA is. It's called the PCT, Patent Cooperation Treaty. It's about 140 countries and it's 18 months long. And what that is it costs like $5,000 for a filing fee, right? So you've got all your attorney's fees on top of that. And so this is the cheap way, right? And that's what I tell everybody when you're going to international protection. Like I've talked to people that have over $250,000 invested in an intellectual property portfolio that covers multiple countries. And it is not difficult to get there. You know, once you get 5-6 countries in, you're usually, you know, getting close to $100,000 of investment. And so when you're talking like, and to give you the quick and easy on a PCT, Patent Cooperation Treaty is an 18-month thing. And so when you file your utility patent, or when you can go actually from a PPA to a PCT, and I apologize for those that aren't up to speed on intellectual property, but this might be a little bit complex for those, but those that are, this will help them. PCT is an 18-month hold on your ability to file in the countries that have signed the PCT, which is the Patent Cooperation Treaty. And so you essentially pay your filing fee, you put your application in, and then it gives you an 18-month window that you can file in any one of those countries without, because let's say you file prior to Patent Cooperation Treaty, if you file in the United States, and then it takes you, 2 years to file in Japan. Well, then Japan, they look at it and say, well, you have prior art here. Well, this Patent Cooperation Treaty gives you the window so that you can file in all these countries and not have your other filings be considered prior against them. And so that's what's used as a holding fee to get your ability to file in these countries. You then have to pay a fee to file into the different countries. So like right away, if you know you're going to file in Europe and you're going to file in US, Canada, and Australia, it is cheaper to forego the PCT and just automatically file in those countries. But you need the finances to be able to do that. And you can't, extend those windows out. So.
And like you said, it's super expensive.
Super expensive. So, and like that one person that I was talking about that had $250,000 invested in international protection, they invested it prior to getting interest in their product, which I thought was nuts, right? So go out and get interest and have the company file for the protection all across these different countries.
Yeah, that makes the most sense. You don't always need it worldwide. Like it's not even, it's not going to do you any good if nobody's selling it or buying it, And
some of my licensing deals, I get paid internationally because I'm giving them the rights in the United States. That's it. So it's just, I get 7% of sales worldwide. And they don't differentiate the fact that I have a patent in the United States only versus having a patent worldwide or anywhere else. So
that's
I just
get a great point. That's such a great point. And we've seen deals like that
all the time. That's actually more common than splitting out countries for your intellectual property rights.
Yeah.
They just give you a blanket fee for any product that they sell worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a risk to file internationally if you don't have that interest and you don't have that forward trajectory with a licensee.
Yeah. Yep.
So we're gonna let's hot seat this a little bit and
all right, let's hot seat it. Let's
go. We're supposed to do 19 minutes. I'm gonna let everybody know we're probably gonna go over. So would it be okay if I included a picture of my prototype, semi-crude, along with my sell sheet, or should I leave that out? Thanks. Would it be okay if I included a picture of my prototype, semi-crude, along with my sell sheet? Well, marketing is an emotional experience. Mm-hmm. And when it's an emotional experience, if you've got them clicking on all these different links and looking at these different pictures, then it might not have the emotional impact that is needed to get them to call you back and say, we are interested. And so like, it depends on if that picture adds or subtracts from your sell sheet. And if you've got a prototype, why aren't you making a video?
Yeah. And also like, what's the visual on the actual sell sheet? Like, are you using the picture of your prototype on the sell sheet, or do you have a 3D rendering?
That's actually the better question. Why are you using the actual prototype picture in the sell sheet?
Yeah. So, I mean, because if it's not worthy of the sell sheet, don't send it separately. Like, you either, it can be a rough prototype and you do a video like what David said. Like you can even fake it for the camera if it doesn't fully work. But if it's not sell sheet worthy, then you shouldn't be sending it, alongside with the sell sheet.
Yep. Agree. All right. Misha. So I hope that helps on your question. Let us know if you have any other questions. Misha says, thank you, David and Amy Jo, for putting on this Q&A. I know you're both experts at negotiating, using stories to negotiate. Do you have any suggestions, stories to help negotiate out of having to indemnify the company from IP liability? That is a very complex question. It sounds like you are in negotiation. Seems like a lot to ask, since I would only be collecting a royalty and anyone can accuse me of violating their IP patent without merit. Thanks for any knowledge on this. So, this one is actually one of the ones that is hard to get around, to be honest. And this is actually the most common indemnification. For those that don't know what indemnification is essentially make whole. And so what Misha is saying is the company wants them to be made whole if there's any IP liability. So to simplify that, it's saying like, company A, you've licensed your product to them and they start selling it. Company B comes along and says that there's intellectual property infringement here, so we're going to sue company A. Well, then company A will just say, hey, we're indemnified. Inventor, you're taking care of this lawsuit for us. And so essentially the indemnification deflects the lawsuit over to the inventor. And that's what she's saying is, how do I get out of this? That is the hard thing, because we as inventors, what are we bringing to the table? We're bringing a product. And if the product is not recognized as just a product, but as intellectual property, then the company says, well, you're liable for the intellectual property of this. And that's how they create liability for the inventor. And this is really the liability that inventors are taking on when we're signing licensing agreements. Most inventors don't understand the complexity of that. When you're signing on the dotted line, there is liability that you're taking on, because you're saying that this IP is solid. But now with the PTAB and the process of invalidating a patent, you've created some liability there, because even if you've gotten a granted patent from the USPTO, United States Patent and Trademark Office, and you license it to a company, and then another company comes along and invalidates it, that indemnification can be used now, because the patent office has said, you have a patent, and now the patent office says you don't have a patent, but now you've licensed rights that you don't own anymore. And like, we're getting super deep into the weeds, but that's like I don't want to say the dark side of this industry, but like that is the liability that is created for inventors, that most inventors, when they're signing on the dotted line, do not know. It's whenever I'm working with people, I'm like, this is what this is. Like, you are creating liability for yourself. And that's why 100% of the time, Misha, you are signing as a company, not as yourself. 100%. Because if you sign this as you, the individual, and then this indemnification clause is used, then they can go after your personal assets, house, any type of cash that you have in the bank. But if it is through a company, then they can only go after what value or assets are within that company. So
great tip.
That's your like road around it, is you just create a company that, let's say that they do use the indemnification clause. Well, the company shouldn't have anything more than a little bit of royalties in it that you're essentially passing through to yourself. So you're creating or protecting yourself in that way. This is the clause that I always tell people, get an attorney involved, because indemnity is dangerous. You can create liability for yourself that you didn't know. Sorry, I don't have a more direct answer on how to get that out, but if companies understand and want to keep that in, there's very low probability that you're going to get it taken out. I've signed contracts where my company is liable for or are indemnifying them against intellectual property.
I think you did a great job explaining that, because that can be a very complicated situation there. And you did a really nice job kind of simplifying that, because I'm seasoned and that's still confusing for me.
I will say that is probably the most complex topic that is involved in licensing, is the indemnification and protection of the intellectual property. And so here's the other part, Misha, make sure that they are indemnifying you for any manufacturing or product related issues. Because like, you don't want it to be the case that, somebody trips, falls, hurts themselves, sues a company for $1 million. And what they're doing is they're just slinging lawsuits up against the wall to see where they stick. And they say, oh, here's the patent holder, we're going to sue them too. Well, if you don't have an indemnification clause to protect you against product related things, then that lawsuit sticks to you. And you have to either take care of it or figure out how to pay it off. And so if you're indemnified against product related things, then you would just say, company, you're taking care of this lawsuit. And I guess another thing is you have to look at the probability of the product and what kind of intellectual property category it is, right? Is it a highly competitive intellectual property category, or is there low competition for IP? Are there a lot of lawsuits like DRTV, a lot of lawsuits associated with intellectual property? If it's there, then I probably wouldn't want to be the indemnify the company. But if it's in like the simple kitchenware products, it's not as big issue. If it does come down to this, there is indemnification, essentially indemnification insurance, and it costs about $1,000 a month. It's about $12,000 a year. So that is possible. Man, here I am saying we need to speed through these questions. No, we're not. All right. Next question, Richard. In the hardware space, how difficult is it to license a product? Could I have a deal that allows me to sell my product myself and at the same time be licensed? Amy Jo, you want to tackle the first part of the question? In the hardware space, how difficult is it to license a product?
Hardware, again, we have categories and then micro categories, but for the most part, hardware, from my experience anyway, is a pretty friendly space. And, it just kind of depends on, that's a very broad question because it depends on, like, if you're talking about like a power tool, that's different from what would be like
a hand tool.
Yeah, like a hand tool.
A different screwdriver versus a different power screwdriver.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's very, very different. So anytime you have like electronics involved with any idea, even if you're in kitchenware, it's always going to be a little bit more difficult. But so hardware is not too bad. Do you care if I touch on a little bit of the second question, and then you can kind of like add to like both, I guess, both questions. But so we both work with students who have already, like, they either have patented products or the products weren't patentable. They didn't have the best experience with licensing them, and they just took it upon themselves and just started selling them themselves. And once they started having proven sales, then they wanted to visit the licensing approach, and they actually gained a lot more experience, or interest. When it comes to the licensing approach with a larger company, because they, one way or another, either were tired out with selling, they didn't have the funds to grow the business, they were just kind of stuck in a spot or whatever. But if you have proven sales in a product, then you can license it easier. And then also, again, depending on the product, like if you have inventory and if you're working with a company, you can work out terms where you can continue to sell, where your licensee can also sell, because they're going to be bigger than you. And so they don't really think of you as an individual as much of a competitor. And so, a lot of the times they don't really care if you continue to sell it if you want to, right?
Yep. The only thing I've seen in those deals is they'll do price protection. So like they'll say you can't sell below our MSRP. That's it. So like they don't want you undercutting the market and just giving out a lower price. And that's it. So like, yeah, done all the time. And you can do it actually in different ways. So like you can go out and find your own manufacturer, or you can buy it. Like they'll add on a percentage and then you essentially buy it from their manufacturer, which they actually like, because then it increases their volume, which decreases their per unit price, because there's an economy of scale when you're also ordering product from them to resell.
Nice. Great tip.
All right, Richard, I hope that helped. Do ask us any other questions you have. Carl asks a follow-up question on his furniture idea, how to protect this kind of idea, I would, obviously with protection, you've got to speak to an attorney, but the way I would do it is I'd file a PPA, get the conversation going, and that PPA will probably evolve as you go, and you'll file multiple PPAs as you go along. Ray, hello, buddy. Hey. Hope you're doing excellent. You're my hero. Remember, keep smiling and never give up your dreams. Thanks, Ray. Yeah, no, Ray's awesome. Richard had the question on hardware. It's a collapsible tray. Okay. So yeah, collapsible tray, that's very licensable.
Yeah.
It's not. So when you get into like, and what Amy Jo was touching on is like, when you get into power tools, there's a bigger investment. So companies want more solid intellectual property. They want functional prototypes. And so you as the inventor, you have to invest more money. You have to invest more time to make them work. When there's simpler products that don't take the investment level, then they don't require those higher levels of like granted patents and functional prototypes. You can get away with a lot less. And so that's what she was differentiating in, like, depends on the product, because like when you get power tools or you get electronics, there's usually higher levels of investment, and that takes higher levels of inventor involvement and execution.
Yeah. Well, and also liability purposes, like how user friendly it is. People can electrocute themselves. They can drill their hands. There's insurance.
Liability. Yeah.
Like there's a lot, there's just a lot more that goes into the more complicated products.
Yep. And then Daniel, thank you for coming out, Daniel. Should product designers try to focus more on companies that manufacture in the US, given the current supply chain issues with China? Yes and no. Okay, so I'll give you a personal example. I was, for those that don't know, I license my own products, and I also partner with inventors and help them license their products. And I was partnered with an inventor. We were working on a project, and a company came along that was very interested in carrying the product. And one of the biggest selling points was the fact that it was made in the United States, and they weren't going to have disruptions in distribution chain, because they've got manufactured in Michigan and their distribution chain was in Ohio. So literally they don't, you know what I mean? Like they're just putting it on a pallet and trucking it like an hour and a half. And so they're like, this is great, because it was, there are difficulties with the supply chain from China. And so they look at that and say, yes, we like this product, we like this innovation, but we're going to have a hard time getting it here. Okay. And so I've had a couple projects that are starting to get moved over to the United States or manufactured in Mexico because of these supply chain issues. People are like, oh, the supply chain issues will end soon. But some people are like, we don't know when they're going to end, so we're just going to figure out a different path to market. So Daniel, I don't know if I'd necessarily focus on companies that manufacture in the US, but I would keep an open mind to the possibility, because I even work with companies that are manufacturing traditionally in China and are moving some of their stuff over to the US because they need product to sell. I mean, that's the lifeblood of their business, is new products. And if they can't get new products, they're not going to continue in business. So I don't know, Amy Jo, what are your thoughts on that? US focus versus China?
I agree with you. I would not focus on like where the companies necessarily manufacture, right, like at the beginning stages. But if a company were to say, hey, we're interested, but we're a little concerned with sourcing the materials or whatever the case may be with our manufacturers overseas, that type of thing. I'm working with a student right now who actually has a licensee who is working overseas, but they are interested in sourcing a U.S. manufacturer because of exactly what you said. And I was able to kind of connect our student with with somebody here in the States, and we're going to try to see if we can
Chris?
connect the licensee. Yeah, Chris.
Okay, cool.
With the licensee to become their U.S. manufacturer.
Sweet.
So that's what their student Nick, by the way.
Okay.
And so I. And
okay,
so,
awesome.
Yeah. So
Wow.
like we're working on that. I'm sorry, I forgot to update you on that. But
keep me in the dark.
But yeah, you can do that. Like, I mean, don't think that just because you're like trying to license a product, and like, don't think. I've made a lot of mistakes in when I was a newbie, thinking that that I just rely on the company to have all the answers, and they don't, and we can provide them with additional answers. So you can connect them with find your own US based manufacturers if you feel like that's something that is like stalling the deal.
Yep. So, and this is it was another partnership deal that I was working on, and it was literally like they got so excited, they're ready to license it, signed a contract, started moving forward, and then it literally just was like when we got to the sourcing, because it was just like we hit the wall, and the company's like, we gotta give the rights back to you because we can't find anybody that can source this. And we're like, no, we will find them, right? And so we started knocking on doors and finding source and doing all this stuff, but just our desire and passion and like pursuit, right? Because we started sending them quotes from local manufacturers and all this different stuff. They're like, all right, like this is getting into the range, and this is US made. Like we can check out like Vietnam and a couple other places. And so they started bouncing around and checking pricing with us because they saw that enthusiasm and that passion for getting the product to work. And we didn't end up finding the manufacturer. They did, but it was our continued pursuit that really kept the ball rolling, because, most inventors, they get to the point when a company comes in and says like, Dave, Amy, Joe, this is not going to work. And like most inventors are like, okay. And you're like, no, it's going to work. Like,
like, why don't you think like you have to be comfortable asking questions
and pushing the envelope? Because like I've had tons of companies that have told me, no, David, this is not going to work. And I'm like, no, it is going to work. Let me show you. I remember one that they had their attorney come back and tell me, they're like, this is not going to work because of these 6 patents. And I was like, nope, I'm going to go figure out how. I literally like read all those patents 10 times and I figured out how each one worked. And then I sent them, it was like a couple page persuasive argument on like each one and how we get patent. And they're like, okay, makes sense. Let's go forward now. I'm like, see, it will. Yeah.
But they're not willing to put the effort into it. And we are, but we have to, though. That's what David's saying. Like, you have to be willing. Just because somebody tells you no doesn't mean that it's the end all be all answer.
And but like we have to give context to that, because like you can get the crazy inventor label by just being like, no, it will work. No. You have to get context, because like what we are good at, like I'm pointing to all of us here, we're all inventors. We're good at solving problems when we know what the problem is. And it's like that's like the golden ticket for most inventors. If you say, inventor, I'll license a product that you can brush your teeth and floss at the same time, they're like, all right, I can fix that problem. And so when we as inventors get that email or that call that says, Amy, Joe, this is not going to work out. And like some inventors, they slump their shoulders and like, okay, it's not going to work out. Other inventors are like, no, it's going to work out. And they're like, no, it's not. But then there's the last inventor that comes back and says, well, why? Why is it not going to work? Yeah. And then they dig down deep and then they actually find the real problem. And like, that's what they told me. They said, David, this is not going to work. I said, why is that? They said, our attorneys found stuff. I said, what did they find? And then they're like, well, here, like, these are the 6 patents. And I was like, oh, I got this. And so like, you have to ask why until they get to a problem that is a solvable problem. Most of them, like, I mean, I've given examples on like the YouTube videos and all that. Like they said, this is not going to work. I said, why? I said, too big. I said, what do you mean it's too big? They said, it's physically too big to fit on the shelf. I said, all right, if I can figure out a smaller footprint, then would you license it? They say, yeah, of course. And so then I just redesigned the product to fit in the footprint that they wanted. And so like, I feel like I've gotten every deal after multiple times they've told me it's not going to work, but then I will figure out the way. And Amy Jo, you nailed it on the head. We are motivated to figure out that problem. They just move on to the next project and they can just tell us, no, thanks. See you later, inventor. And that's what makes the difference between unsuccessful and successful inventors. The ones that are willing to take the next step.
You have to ask why. You have to still discover, like have a discovery phase even after the no. It's so important. I had a discussion with a student today about that. And he's like, I'm just not going to do it. And I'm like, well, then you're not going to get your answers, because you have to know why. You have to figure out if there's a trend here, like what's going on. So,
because like, and I love this little tangent we're going on, because if one company has this issue, you can call another 80 companies. Most of them are going to have the same issue.
Yep.
They're going to. And so if you don't get it figured out on the front end, God, I'm trying to think of a contextual example of it.
Well, you had that with your Arctican.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Perfect example.
Yeah.
I pitched it to a ton of companies and it was early on in my career. So I didn't understand that, like asking why. And so they would just tell me no. I said, okay. And then I moved on to the next company. And it was actually out of frustration that I was like, I called this guy back that he sent me an email and said no. I called him. I was like, I'm gonna be honest. I was like, I'm just getting started. I don't know what I'm doing. I was like, can you tell me why? Like, why is everybody saying that this is cool, but don't want to license it? And he's like, oh, simple. It's not manufacturable. I'm like, why is it not manufacturable? Like I was literally going nuts because I'd called and at that point it was probably like 40 companies. And like to actually get in and get a response from 40 companies, like you're doing probably like 200 calls to like get that level of response. Right.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to freak people out with that, but that's reality.
Yeah. Not necessarily 200 companies, but like the amount of calls and follow-ups and,
Yeah. And so like, I was frustrated, right? Like I was kind of like, why isn't this working? Like everybody's telling me, and I would get probably like a 30% response rate of people saying, we're interested, but no. And I was like, okay, why is everybody interested, but they won't want to move forward? And I finally got the answer that it wasn't manufacturable because the product that I was pitching was a blow molded product and it didn't have the tolerances or ability to be manufactured in the way that I was presenting. And nobody would tell me that. And nobody's going to come out and tell you your baby's ugly or what's wrong with it. You have to ask them why. And once you figure out why, you can fix it. Every product I've licensed, I figured out why, I fixed it, and then I got it licensed.
Well, and think about it. It goes down like the grapevine too, because the person you're talking to doesn't necessarily know the manufacturing issues. So they talk to their manufacturer, and then the manufacturer, they may not specialize in the way that you have it designed. And they're going to say, no, we can't make it like this, or we can't make it affordably. And so then they they send that to your point of contact, and your point of contact says, nope, it's a wash, like we're out, Yep. So it's like playing telephone, as
it's a big game of telephone.
Yep. And you're on the telephone, but you have to stay on the telephone.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I guess beyond the questions that we've answered, like, I feel like if that's a big takeaway for people, to like ask why when they get in that situation, it totally changes the game for you.
You have to. You're not done. Just because you get a no, you received a no, doesn't mean that you're done. It doesn't. You have to keep going. You have to keep asking questions. And again, like David said, don't be that crazy inventor. Don't harass people. Don't show up at their doorstep. But, be a professional and just be comfortable asking questions. Why? So you can continue to evolve.
Yeah. And you're not going to get 100% response rate of people answering your why.
Yeah.
And so like, here's the other part. Companies don't like telling you that your product stinks because they know you put all this time and effort into it. And so like, they have a hard enough time telling you no. and then you ask them to explain themselves, right? That's a difficult thing, right? I've rejected you, I've broken up with you, and now I have to explain why you're you're a bad person. Like, no, nobody wants to do that.
No.
And so you have to frame that question by putting them up on a pedestal. And the way that I've found even today in my career, and I hope no potential licensees are listening to this webinar, I'm going to tell you my secrets, right? I tell them, I'm just getting started in this business, and I'm trying to understand like why this product's not working, right? So, I'm putting myself below them, right? I'm not saying like I'm better, I know anything. I'm saying just getting started in this. And in reality, I am. Every product I'm getting started new because I'm learning new things about the new products and the new industry. So I start out the email. I say, thank you so much for the quick response. I was wondering if you could help me out. I say, I'm just getting started in this industry, and just, could you give me any insight into the reason why you guys won't want to move forward with this? Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to set up their ego so that they get to be like the superhero that's saving this entrepreneur from a decade-long adventure down this tunnel of terrible product. And so like I'm making them, if they can just take 2 minutes of their time, just type out a response to the reason why, they're going to give me so much insight. And so if you phrase it and you put the question in that way, or the email in that way, they're like, oh, I can take 2 minutes and I can save this person, and I can help them out, and I can do my good deed for the day. Heck yeah, I'll type that response. And
they will.
And they will.
They will.
And that little bit, honestly, I call it, I have a couple of webinars, but I call it the yellow brick road, because it leads you to the answer that you need to get your product licensed.
Well, and that's beneficial for you in a lot of ways, like for all of us in a lot of ways. I do the same thing. I always want to be humble, and kind of almost come across a little bit vulnerable in the sense of like, this is a new product of mine. I've done a lot of research for it, put a lot of work into it, but you're the professional here. So if you'd be willing to spare a couple minutes just to tell me why you came to your conclusion, boom, like it's the same concept of what David said. Like you can word it in a lot of different ways, but being humble and being vulnerable, these people, like they want to help you. They do.
They truly do.
So there's somebody, I don't know for sure if this, I have 2 different chat boxes, David. But somebody had asked if we offer initial consultation / assessment, of viability of products. Mm-hmm. And we do. So
we do.
That's,
So, and that's actually a good close on the webinar. So we do offer, and I want to tell everybody, like initial consultation, like we as coaches, obviously we have quite a bit of experience. We've seen a lot of products get licensed. We know things that work and things that don't, but there's no crystal ball. Like I've worked on projects and I've been, coaching people that their product, it seems off the wall, but they go out and get it licensed. And then I've had products that are super innovative. And here's a little bit of the difference is like, you can have super innovative, very cool products, but they're not profitable innovation. And a lot of that is not revealed until you actually get into potential licensees and you start to develop the product with them, is that, all right, this is not profitable innovation. So like, the assessment or consultation on the product viability has to come with a grain of salt. Like I always look at a project and say, is it in a category where products are licensed? Like if somebody brought me a product that like has to go on the manufacturing line, as we talked about on automotive, like has to be the rearview mirror on a Ford F-150. Like I'd say, you're going to have a really difficult time licensing this. Do you have a couple years and a lot of money to put into this? No, you don't. Okay, then I would start on a different project. So like category always comes first for me. And then inventor skill set, that is something that, are you willing to work on it? Those are some things that really go into the assessment. And so it's not necessarily always product related, but more categorical, inventor,
level of complexity, time availability. So not only are you willing to work on it, but like we have a lot of students that we've worked with in the past that are like, hey, I'm gung ho on doing this. And then they're like, I'm working 60 hours a week or 80 hours a week because I'm a doctor and I have 4 kids and I just can't do it, like myself. Like, it's like, well, is it realistic for your schedule? There are a lot of factors that we look into when we give those consultations, but we're going to be straightforward with you on that.
Yeah. And so the reason we both give context to our assessment is people come to us wanting this like green light to say, yes, this is it. This is the product that is going to be licensed and is going to change your life. And we don't give that. It's more so like, here's your pluses. This is a good product because of these reasons, and it's licensable because of this, and it's not licensable because of these things. And then you as the inventor have to weigh out your decision on moving forward. And so Mel, if you wanted to reach out to either myself or Amy Jo, both of our emails are, mine's David@InventTribe. Amy Jo's is AmyJo@InventTribe. And then we can get a conversation started from there. To let everybody know, we are doing a webinar tomorrow night if you're interested. Through this whole Q&A, you've heard us talk about working with students and the process and all these different aspects. And so what we do on tomorrow night's webinar is I break down the 5 steps of licensing and give everybody kind of the framework that I used, that all my students use to get products licensed. And so if you are interested in actually seeing that laid out, do sign up. We have a link in the chat box here. Let me grab the link. There it is.
And I'm sure, are you going to be sending it out on LinkedIn as well tomorrow too?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll be sending it out on all platforms. So let me get this link. So if you want to sign up, check that out. Also, if you need more information or had any questions, obviously you can email myself or Amy Jo to help you out. And I really enjoyed this Q&A. I know we went down some rabbit holes, but they were fun, especially the last one. I really like that one.
Me too.
And I want to say thank you to everybody that's here. Obviously, you guys make the webinar work with all the questions that you do ask. So we appreciate that and appreciate you spending some time with us and hope that we added some value.
Thank you, guys.
Yes. Thank you. Have a wonderful night.